You know, for over a century, we've been told one main story about who started World War I. But what if that official story isn't just incomplete, but fundamentally wrong? Today, we're diving into a really provocative counterargument from historian Ralph Raico. It's one that challenges pretty much everything you thought you knew about the Great War and where it truly came from.
So, this right here, this is Article 231 of the Treaty of Versailles. It's the official verdict, better known as the War Guilt Clause. And let me tell you, it was a massive break from tradition. See, never before had a defeated nation been forced to accept not just the costs of a war, but the entire moral blame for starting it. This single sentence didn't just end the fighting, it basically cemented Germany's role as the lone villain for generations.
But is that really the whole story? Well, the historical analysis we're digging into today argues not even close. It makes a powerful case that the blame was spread much, much wider, and the real causes were way more complex than the official story would have you believe.
All right, so to really get our heads around this argument, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. We'll kick things off with that official verdict. Then we'll explore what Raico calls a web of complicity across Europe. From there, we'll jump across the Atlantic to look at America's road to war, what Raico calls a sham neutrality, and finally, how the war impacted liberty right here at home.
Okay, first up, the official verdict. Forcing Germany to accept total moral responsibility wasn't just tough, it was totally new. A complete break from how things were done. And according to Raico, this unprecedented move didn't settle anything. Instead, it lit a fire under a historical debate that's, believe it or not, still raging today. Which, leads us right into Section 2, this idea of a web of complicity. So, if Germany wasn't the only guilty party, who else was involved? Raico's analysis paints a picture of a whole continent just tangled up in competing ambitions and alliances, pushing everyone closer and closer to the edge.
Now, take a look at this timeline. What's absolutely wild is just how fast everything went downhill. The assassination on June 28th sets off this chain reaction. Raico's analysis really hones in on Russia starting its preparatory military moves way back on July 25th, before other big players had mobilized. And by July 30th, when Russia went for full mobilization, a huge European war became almost a dead certainty. The point here is that this wasn't just one country's plan, it was a total cascade of disastrous decisions from all over. And this slide really shows you why. According to Raico, Europe was basically a powder keg just waiting for a spark. You had France, obsessed with revanchism, this burning need to get even with Germany for a past defeat. You had Russia, with its grand pan-slavist dreams of dominating Eastern Europe. You had Serbian nationalism, which was a direct threat to the very existence of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And then there's Britain, acting all neutral in public, but secretly locked into agreements to back France if war broke out.
All right, now let's hop across the Atlantic. Section 3, America's Path to War. While Europe was catching fire, President Woodrow Wilson was telling Americans they had to be neutral, even in word and thought. But Raico says that whole idea was a myth right from the get-go.
I mean, just look at the contrast here. It's pretty stark. On one side, you have Wilson, the great peacemaker. But on the other,
Raico
points to this long record of aggressive intervention. Before the Great War was even a thing, the Wilson administration had already sent troops into Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and Nicaragua. They even tried to control Mexico's civil war, which led to the bloody occupation of Veracruz. This was not, to put it mildly, the track record of a non-interventionist.
So, who is really driving this policy? Well, you have to meet Colonel Edward House. This guy had no official job title, no formal position, but Wilson himself called him my second personality. His thoughts and mine are one. Raico argues that House was the real mastermind behind America's slide into war, a guy with unbelievable power, but zero accountability to the public.
And if you want a really wild look into House's thinking, Raico tells us to check out a novel he wrote. It's called Philip Drew, Administrator, and it's all about this charismatic leader who basically becomes a dictator to force his vision on America, and then on the rest of the world.
Raico
Holds this up as a pretty disturbing blueprint for the kind of radical, world-rebuilding ambition that was really driving the Wilson administration.
So this brings us right to Section 4, calls a sham neutrality. Now we're going to look at the specific policies that, according to Raico, prove America had already picked a side long before it ever fired a shot.
It all really starts with the British hunger blockade. This was a flagrant violation of international law. The British goal, in Winston Churchill's own words, was to starve the whole population of Germany into surrender by blocking all imports, and that included food for civilians. The source argues that while the Wilson administration wrote a few angry letters, it ultimately just let the blockade happen, which meant it was effectively helping one side starve the other.
And that leads directly to this key policy: strict accountability. Wilson announced that he would hold Germany strictly accountable for any American life lost in a U-boat attack. But here's the thing Raico points out: that same standard was never, ever applied to Britain's illegal blockade. This created a massive double standard that put the US on a collision course with Germany while basically giving Britain a free pass.
And it's worth remembering again, this entire analysis, from the web of complicity in Europe to the myth of American neutrality, it's all laid out in detail in Ralph Raico's historical rebuttal, Great Wars and Great Leaders.
Okay, now this is what Raico presents as the smoking gun. This is a direct quote from Robert Lansing, Wilson's own Secretary of State, from his personal memoirs. He flat out admitted that all those diplomatic protests to Britain were a total sham, written specifically to look neutral, while leaving the door wide open for America to use the exact same illegal tactics as soon as it got into the war. Just incredible.
So what happened when America did finally join the war? Well, in our final section, The War on Liberty, we get to what Raico says is the ultimate point: that the war's most lasting impact wasn't on the battlefields of Europe, but in how it completely transformed America itself.
Just look at these numbers. They're staggering.
Raico
Shows how government just exploded in size and power. The national debt shot up by more than 25 times. The top income tax rate? It went from 13% all the way up to a mind-boggling 77%. And the federal workforce more than doubled in just a couple of years. This was nothing short of a revolution in the size of the American government.
Raico actually has a name for this period. He calls it the rise of war socialism. The federal government literally took over huge chunks of the economy. We're talking railroads, shipping, telephones. It created brand new agencies like the War Industries Board to centrally plan what factories made and what prices they could charge. Raico argues this wasn't just a temporary thing. It created the blueprint for government intervention that would define the next century of American politics, a model later used and expanded during the New Deal.
And here's maybe the biggest irony of all, according to Raico. While America was supposedly off fighting to make the world safe for democracy, freedom back home was being crushed. The Espionage and Sedition Acts basically made it a crime to criticize the war. The famous socialist leader Eugene Debs was thrown in jail just for giving an anti-war speech. Newspapers were censored. A movie producer was actually imprisoned because his film about the American Revolution was considered anti-British, and they were our new allies.
And really, this quote from President Wilson himself just says it all, doesn't it? There was zero tolerance for anyone who disagreed. This wasn't a debate, it was a crusade. And as Raico makes clear, if you got in the way, you were going to face the full, unstoppable power of the government.
So when you pull it all together, Raico's argument is that World War I was the moment everything changed. It was the birth of the massive, interventionist American government we know today. It completely redefined government's role at home and America's role in the world, forever. Which leaves us with one last really big question to think about. What parts of that wartime legacy are still shaping our lives right now, today?